want to talk about Family Matters. Yes, the sitcom from the late 80s and throughout the 90s. By default, it was one of my favorite shows. I watched nearly every episode of the first 5 or 6 seasons. In fact, my 4th grade school picture that I had made, I'm wearing green suspenders with a t-shirt underneath it because by default, I thought Steve Urkel was cool, even though he was clearly a nerd. And for me, I never thought, oh, but he's black. I can't look like Steve Urkel even with my suspenders. It never crossed my mind as a 10-year-old boy in 1991. I wore those suspenders for the picture. I like wearing suspenders. Why? Because of Steve Urkel. In some ways, apparently, I thought, obviously, he was funny and that he was cool despite being a nerd. So, Family Matters. It was culturally relevant for me. But clearly, they were a black American family living in Chicago. And I never had any trouble relating to the show. Now, unlike some certain cast members of Saved by the Bell, it was different with Family Matters because sporadically they would actually acknowledge that they were black. Not regularly, but I can think of a few times. I can think of the time, this very special episode where someone spray painted the N-word in Laura's locker at school. I can think of another time when there was like this auction for a quilt that went back for generations, and it had African culture in the quilt, and so I remember it being knowledge of that. Other than that, I struggled to really think about when they really talked about being black. So what I'm asking in this video, I'm asking you, overall, was the show Family Matters, was that family and Steve Urkel by default, were they culturally white? Were they ultimately a black family that could have just as easily, for the most part, been a white family, but they just happened to be played by black actresses and actors? Other than that, were they mostly, for the most part, other than a few episodes, interchangeable? And was that as good as America could do at that time, to have a black family but not bring up their blackness that much? Were they ultimately culturally white? Could we have interchanged them with white actors and it basically been the same show? You tell me. I'm asking the question. I don't know, but I'm leaning towards saying that in America, where we were in the late 80s and early 90s, America was getting used to seeing diversity on TV. We weren't used to people openly talking about the diversity, but we were getting used to seeing it. And for me, as a 10-year-old kid, I loved the show. I didn't care what they looked like. I liked the show. I liked the characters. It was a great show, right in line with Full House, Imperfect Strangers, and Step by Step, and Just the 10 of Us. All those shows that are basically made by the same people anyway. It fit right in because all those other shows that I mentioned had white families, and this happened to be the one that just happened to be black. Do you think that Family Matters was culturally white? I want to say that basically it was, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there was more black identity in that show than I remember. What do you think? Tell me in the comments. Help me sort this out.